Great to have you here.
Pleasure.
So, before we get into some of the politics, I do want to ask you about Charlie Kirk. I know you knew him. I know you spoke with him regularly. How do you deal with all this? How do we process all this as a nation?
Yeah, so, I could speak at some great length on that, and you've already covered it very well. Charlie is someone that I became friends with over the course of the last several years. Met him first in Bandera. It was a great honor. He came here and we were able to talk. And then over the time of the last several years, through the speaker's fight, through a lot of things, through the election last year, we were comparing notes. And his impact on me is pretty significant in terms of our meeting of the minds about the role of faith and the importance of one particular fight that our side, if you will, or our people who share our values and beliefs, I don't believe quite get. And in fact, the last exchange I had with Charlie, which is about a month ago, last serious exchange, was about this issue, which was the advance of Islam and Sharia law. That it is directly opposite of our Western civilization, our values, who we are as Christians, undermines everything about what we believe, and that we're not taking it seriously. And he gave a great speech. You should go back and look at it if you didn't see it, back in July over in the UK. And I had sent it to him and I said, this was phenomenal. And then I sent him the speech that I gave on the House floor about a year ago, laying out this issue. And he looked at it and we had an exchange back and forth about what do we need to do to try to bring this more front and center. And I only bring that up because he just had a gift for kind of looking in at the bigger picture issues and the things that are the connectivity and the stuff that matters. And the only thing that I'll share about what happened last week, many of you have, seen over the, now almost 8 years that I've been out on the campaign trail and stuff, see my kids, Charlie, my son's name is Charlie. Many of you know that, and you've met him, and Virginia. Well, Charlie is 16 now. And he goes to a classical Christian school. He and my daughter do, for the reasons you've already discussed about why that's important. And there's a large group of his classmates that are very fond of Charlie Kirk. And I knew this. And I was at the Capitol physician. I had a sinus infection, and I was getting an antibiotic. I'm sitting down in the physician's office, and then I see the news. But the news was just of a shooting. And so I texted Charlie Kirk to check and see how things were going. And of course, I didn't know the status. But then as I learned, I texted my son, Charlie, because even though my kids are not allowed to have social media, they don't have social media on their phones. Their friends sometimes do when they get out of school. They don't have phones in the school. But I bring that up because I was concerned that Charlie would see the video, which goes to a whole nother conversation we need to have about these devices and how these things are basically evil incarnate. Yep. And you're putting a loaded gun into your kids' pockets. And so I said to him, it's being reported that he's passed. And my Charlie said, oh no, is that real news or is that public? And I said, yes, he's gone. I'm sorry, buddy. And he said, I would have loved to meet him someday. And then he sent me a scripture unprovoked. This is, just an hour or so after the facts. And the scripture was 1 Corinthians 15:58. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. And that to me that's the actual story. And it shows you the impact of Charlie and the impact of what matters. And I'm starting to go long on this, but it matters so much. We had 2,000 kids down at the Texas Youth Summit in the Woodlands last night with a full, I'm talking, Nick Schatzline was there. You guys, Nick was down there bringing the gospel, preaching. You had a full praise band. You had people like giving their lives to God. You had Chloe Cole there talking about the transgender cult and all that's happening. And there is a spirit moving that is something that is beyond, it's the Lord, because it is beyond our capability. We just have to seize it, seize this moment for the great awakening and the great revival that is necessary to save this country and freedom for our kids and grandkids. So.
Amen. Beautifully spoken. Thank you. Congressman, the first time And thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Charlie Kirk was one of the only people I would allow my children to watch on YouTube because he was so respectful,
100%,
so
right.
good, so loving. So thank you for that. The first time you came on my radar, Congressman, I live far away from here, was because of your efforts on the United Nations. You are one of the leaders behind the Defund Act. I believe you're the chief co-sponsor in the House. This would not just defund the United Nations, but would actually sever our relationship. Talk to us about why you think that's needed.
I mean, you explained it earlier. I can't say it much better than you did. It's a godless organization that is destroying our sovereignty and undermining our freedom, and we should not be a part of it, much less fund it. That's just, I think, the end of the inquiry. I think, I got to that bill because one of my colleagues who had it left Congress, so I grabbed it because I felt so strongly about it. It's kind of how it works. Somebody has the bill, you honor them, and you co-sponsor theirs. So I took it and led the bill the last 2 or 3 Congresses. But prior to that, this was a major issue for me to go after this attack on our sovereignty and on Western civilization for all the reasons you just articulated. So I had a bill, as early as 2020, to defund and get us out of the World Health Organization. I was the first to do that. I had a bill to get us, and by the way, this is not about me. It's about, you noticed and observed how smart these folks were, and they knew all the stuff you're talking about. They're feeding me with what they want as constituents. And so this is all stuff that's important to the people that I represent. So the World Health Organization, the United Nations Population Fund, I have a bill to defund that. The bill to defund UNRWA, long before anybody was acknowledging that UNRWA was funneling all the money to the Palestinians and attacking Israel. Yeah. We knew, and I was working with friends of mine that understand it, and we got that out there, and we've been able to successfully beat that back to some degree. But then some of us who voted against the Israel funding bill last year, because it still had funding for UNRWA in it. And so, people say, why are you voting against Israel? I'm not voting against Israel. I'm voting against the ridiculous Washington swamp that pairs funding for Israel with funding for fricking Hamas. So, we went after and attacked that. And I think the reason we've got to be militant about that is because of everything you said. This is a coordinated attack on our way of life. And go back to what I said about Charlie and Sharia and the March of Islam. All of that is undermining our freedom and our way of life. And so we need to defund all of those entities and more.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Donald Trump has picked up the baton on a lot of these things. He's getting us out of WHO. He already told the UNESCO, the UN Education Agency, we're out. Yep. But we did that last time. Yep. And of course, Joe Biden came in and reversed it all. So my question to you, Congressman, is what are the prospects for getting some of this stuff enshrined into federal law so that the next Democrat can't just reverse it all?
Yeah, look, this is the age-old problem, and I could sit here and talk for a long time. You all know the problem, 60 votes in the Senate. It's not even a real thing. We've accepted that as the threshold for some good conservative reason that we don't like it to make it easy to move legislation through the Senate. I've been a champion since the president has come back in his second term that we know that Democrats are going to remove that 60-vote threshold when they get there, and that we need to consider why we are unilaterally disarming. Because right now, we can only advance stuff through reconciliation. So the reason the big, beautiful bill was such an enormous fight was because we knew it was the one opportunity we had at a 50-vote threshold in the Senate to get the things that we wanted to get. So we got some good stuff in there, but we didn't get everything we wanted. And so some of these things you're talking about, getting, say, defunded the United Nations, right? Or a permanent World Health Organization defunding or decoupling. We would need 60 votes in the Senate, or it has to go on a must-pass piece of legislation, or the Senate has to change its rules. Now, the Senate just changed its rules this last week, or it's in the process of, on the nominations, right? Because the Democrats are slow walking some of the nominations. So Thune will consider doing it, but it's not happening fast enough, and I don't think we're going to get that done before next election. So I think we're going to have to make this all front and center about what are we going to do while we have 3 years and change left of this president who is willing to do the things that no one before was willing to do, and how to use Congress now to get that stuff done and signed into law. And I think each of these are things that need to be brought forward. There's no time to waste. And look, I was one that would defend 60 votes in the Senate back in the day. But back in the day was, frankly, when we were having squabbles and disagreements over tax policy, over whether some trust fund should be created. Right now, we're having disagreements over literally the central tenets of our existence as a nation, over what we believe. They want to take away our ability to live free. They want to undermine Texas sovereignty. And look, when I went down this, you guys have seen, I introduced a letter. I put a letter out calling for a special select committee to investigate the coordinated attacks on our way of life. Now, the reason I did that was because if you have to be blind not to look at the coordinated attacks and all of the organizations that are funneling people illegally into the United States under the Biden administration. There's 250 of them, all tied to the United Nations. Todd Bensman, you guys have, Todd, we know him well. Jason Jones, all of our friends have exposed all this stuff. But that's not, the American people haven't seen it all. It's a coordinated, funded network. The same thing exists with respect to the criminal network. The Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, just this week, put out a memo, a book, showing the Wren Collective, tied to the Soros funded, tied to dozens of other organizations that are telling these DAs and prosecutors how to put criminals on our streets. You can go through the list of all of the things that they're doing in a coordinated network. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which was basically putting a target on the back of Charlie, put a target on the back of the Family Research Council, which led to a guard getting shot a decade ago at the Family Research Council because they're a militant left-wing organization. The Antifa, I called the president, so funny story. So I called the president 4 nights ago, whatever it was, whenever the president declared Antifa a terrorist organization. I said, man, finally, thank you, because we couldn't get this through the Congress. And so I called him, it was about 8:30, and he answers the phone. He goes, hello, hey, Mr. President. Hi, Chip. And then he starts talking about, stuff on his mind. So what's on your mind? Thank you, Mr. President, for declaring Antifa a terrorist organization. Can you believe it's taken this long? How could it take this long? Why wasn't this done years ago? And he just goes on for a long time about that. And then we talked about Charlie. We talked about Charlie Kirk and some other things. But then I realized he was in England.
Oh, yikes.
I called him at 2 o'clock in the morning. I forgot that he was in England. But he picked it up. He wouldn't miss a beat. He never sleeps. So anyway, it was funny.
That's wild. Thank you for sharing that story. So we've only got about 10 or 12 minutes left. I want to shift gears a little bit. I know you have been in the federal system for a while. You're now looking to move back to the states. What do you think the states can do to try to rein in Washington, D.C., to try to stop the swamp, the deep state, whatever you want to call it?
Well, I mean, look, Texas has been at the epicenter over the last basically quarter of a century in the AG's office with strong leadership under Attorney General Abbott and Attorney General Paxton, Solicitor General Ted Cruz, all these people that have been suing. Now, it's different when you've got Democrats in charge. You kind of have to run alongside the current administration and kind of help facilitate. But where the most, I think the value is, strongest right now looking forward is looking at the attacks on us as Texas. What can we do to position ourselves on a lot of the issues I've just talked about? How do we go root out those organizations and those entities that are putting criminals on our streets? Soros, the Wren Collective, all that stuff. That shouldn't exist. Right. Why should we accept that or tolerate that? Just don't, right? How can we go after, for example, the big corporate entities, the corporatism that is destroying small businesses, undermining our way of life, buying up our companies, driving up the price of insurance. A lot of them, by the way, global entities. The AG's office has a lot of power, and the state of Texas has a lot of power to say, no, you don't. We're the seventh, eighth biggest economy in the world, 30-odd million people. We should actually go and fight that stuff. We can go fight the spread of Sharia and go fight the spread of the Islamist movement that is resulting in not just Epic City. That's like a shiny object that's bad, but it's 1,500 mosques that are popping up every day. It's more mosques than any other state in the country that exist in this state. That's a problem. I don't mind saying it. I don't have no problem saying it. By the way, we said before about politicians, I've said on the House floor virtually every single one of those things that of course we shouldn't trust the public education system. Of course we shouldn't. That's why my kids are in a classical school. And it's not that I don't appreciate every teacher that's in my family or any teachers here that are trying. 90% of our kids go to public schools, but it is broken, right? I went to public school, K through law school, but it is entirely different now. And I'm not even sure it was that it was what it should have been then, but of course we should be doing those things. So we got to call it out. And by the way, on education, we can do a lot there to go after all of the sinister powers that be, like Chloe Cole. The closest I came to crying besides reading that quote from my son Charlie on the House floor the other night, was Chloe Cole's testimony in the House Judiciary Committee. If you haven't seen Chloe, if you don't know Chloe, go watch her story. I've visited with Chloe a bunch over the time. I'm proud to have her support because individual support matters a lot, because she is a testament to faith and overcoming what this sinister evil almost did to her, taking away her womanhood and her ability to have kids because these evil bastards want to advance their radical agenda. And she's out speaking truth, and we've got to use that to dismantle that whole front so that they can't attack our kids. And the last thing I'll say is, as Attorney General, we got to go to war with the extent to which this is being used to target our kids. I'm sorry, we do. I'm all for freedom, technology. I mean, I don't want to have the government saying, you know, you can't have X, Y, Z. But when you've got, for example, in the For You algorithms that we know they're targeting our kids with evil crap, those corporations need to be liable. They need to know that we're onto it, and we got to stop it. So those are just a small sample of the things I think we need to do.
Fantastic. I have two questions that I hope we can squeeze in before we run out of time here. The first one is, you know, there's a lot of great folks here who are involved, and there's a lot of great folks here who want to get more involved. What are some of the ways you think regular grassroots Texans and Americans can get involved in this battle to save our country?
Well, I mean, I think you know these guys, but you don't know them like I know them. They're there. I mean, the people in this room are the ones beating the pavement in Austin. I mean, I would just say, in short, besides prayer, which we gloss over and we just say it, actually mean it. Like right now, at this moment, with the Spirit moving among us, pray. Active prayer groups. Go up to the cross on the hill at Kerrville and come together and pray. And a little side note, and I know if Sheriff Lath is still here, yeah, there he is, hand up, and all of the first responders. I do want to repeat, you know, what we experienced here, it's changed us, it's changed the community, but we're all moving forward in a way that has been such a great example for the world. I cannot express enough how much I've seen people in Washington affected by what we did versus other communities. The extent to which that's right. And so, without dwelling on that, I bring that up only because when I would speak about this in the media, I would talk about the cross on the hill at Kerrville, the extent to which faith was at the center of our reaction to the floods, that we wanted to advance that those little girls singing hymns leaving Camp Mystic, that all of that was about who we are. And so pray, but also focus intently on, and I say this as someone in Congress, but obviously looking to come home, but what happens in Austin, what happens here in Kerr, what happens in our local, like focus intently there, because that's where the difference gets made in terms of how we're gonna live. We're Texas. And do you think Texas is as strong as it should be? Right. We should change that, like now. This isn't something where we can sit around complaining that, oh man, those bureaucrats in Washington, they're really sticking it to us. Well, they are. Obamacare, blah, 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 other stuff, the stupid subsidies, which by the way, we peeled back half of those Green New Scam subsidies because we stood firm, even in kind of tussling with the Trump administration, in May, when 4 of us voted the bill down in the Budget Committee, forced it back to the committee, and then we were able to shove through more of the Green New Scam subsidy repeal. Not everything we wanted. The battery stuff I'm still fighting, but which we need to kill, by the way. But those things matter. But man, right here in Austin, right here at home, that's where we save freedom. We cannot say that Texas is secure enough. It's not. We can't say Texas is free enough. We can't say our grid is strong enough. We can't say our education system is fixed. Even with the choice bill and everything else, we're not even close. We just subsidize the hell out of the public education system to buy off getting the votes for not even fully universal choice. So we got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of things that I'm sure Terry can talk, legions about our roads and everything else. We've got miles to go for Texas to be remotely what we think it ought to be as the leading voice for freedom in the world, which is what they expect out of Texas. So I'd say focus on Austin and local intently.
Amen. Obviously, there's a a lot of reasons to be concerned about the direction that our country's been heading over the last few decades. It seems like we have a bit of a reprieve right now, and I'm grateful for that. But over the long term, are you optimistic that we can turn this around, save our country, save our civilization?
So, yes, because of what I saw last night with those 2,000 kids and what I'm seeing now in a movement and what I think we're going to see tomorrow in Arizona. Like Don Huppines, I'm here, so I'm not in Arizona. But we're going to see something special tomorrow. And we're going to see the word of, when have you seen the gospel of Christ discussed more than you've seen it in the last 10 days? Like, seriously, we've seen people you would never expect talking about it. We saw the Vice President of the United States just lean into the gospel. That message is now pervasive. And so, look, God works how God works. We're all on this planet momentarily, right? What I won't tell you, but I'll tell you now, what I didn't tell you is that when I had the infection last Wednesday, sinus infection, turned out to be just that. But they also said, oh, that thing you've got, that can also be consistent with blood cancers. I was like, well, funny enough, I had Hodgkin's lymphoma 13 years ago. So they did blood tests, all good, everything's fine. But I bring that up because it just reminds you of that we're only here for a brief moment. Like, all of us are footnotes in history. President Trump will be the biggest footnote in history for this moment in time, and it'll be a really big one. But my point is, we're all just here for a brief moment. What are we going to leave behind for our kids and grandkids? What are we willing to risk everything for? Charlie just did that. Charlie just did it. And he did it for all of the right reasons. And all of our forefathers that ran into the wall of bullets in Normandy, why did they do it? Why did the founders pledge their lives, their fortune, their sacred honor? What are we willing to do? What are we willing to risk? And I think that's, to answer your question, watching these kids, a new generation that can know the Lord and to understand that that's central to our existence as a nation, not just their own salvation, but our nation. We are and need to be and must be a Christian nation if we are going to succeed as a nation. And I believe we will be, and I believe we can have revival, and I believe we can have that kind of rebirth as a nation in our founding principles, as you talked about, and all of those great, the Articles of Confederation, all those different things. But the last thing I'll say is this: it ain't going to be easy. You rightly decried and said the people that are trying to foment civil war and use it for their grift, 100%. But we have to be mindful of the fact that Charlie was shot. Yeah. We have to be mindful of the fact that last night at a student, or really, a young Texans event, right? They had to haul in a bunch of security. They had snipers on the roof. They had SWAT teams around the building. The security tomorrow at the football, can you imagine what that's going to be like? It's a new era, a new world. Now, I think we have to walk through all of this fearlessly and just put the armor of God on and march forward. We could, hit a deer or a car on 16, flying back up the highway tonight. Things can happen, but it's a new world. And I think we have to be mindful of the fight that's in front of us. And we need to be prayerful and thoughtful about it. We need to be sober. But we do need to recognize that the other side does, in fact, want to kill us in our way of life. And so that means getting through that. And when we get through the other side of that, like the founders, it will be glorious, and it will be wonderful, and it will be a new and bright and shining day for our kids and grandkids to live in the America of our dreams and of what we all want to have for them. But we're going to have to do it. We're going to have to be willing to march through this. It's here. And now it is upon us to do what those generations did. And then I believe we will get there.
Phenomenal. I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you very much, Congressman. Fantastic.
No, thank you. God bless you. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everybody. God bless you.